without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Addie and to Barry for the panel. So thank you.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you, Tansi. This is an amazing turnout. Such an amazing turnout, such a small room. Tansi mentioned a couple times what HBR is doing and the Future Economy Project. I want to spend 30 seconds on that and then get into what Mars is doing. But when Trump announced that the U.S. would pull out of Paris, we did something we don't usually do at Harvard Business Review, which is to actually sort of take an action independent of accepting an author's piece on one topic or another, and just felt that there's certain fundamental values. HBR is not about how to make rich people even richer. We think we're about how to make institutions last, how to make institutions be successful for the long term. So certain values like sustainability, like diversity, like long-termism, suddenly have become controversial. And at moments like this, it seems necessary to step up. And we have some great advisors, including Tansi on the project, and some great CEOs on the project. We call it the long-term economy. It's really a declaration that we believe in Paris and beyond. And we're linking to data, pledges, estimates of ROI from these 10 participating companies and hopefully others who are on the same path. And hopefully we can help other companies that want to be on a path like that to do so. But that's it for me. So Mars is, as Tansi said, doing something pretty incredible. And just really a few months ago, they announced a $1 billion commitment to what they're calling the Sustainable Intergeneration Plan. So Barry Parkin is the Chief Procurement and Chief Sustainability Officer at Mars, and this is amazing. So I guess the first question is, so suddenly one day you announced $1 billion. What happened that made you feel like, all right, we're doing this now? Was there a tipping point, or how does that happen?
It's never quite a tipping point, I think, but maybe the 1 minute orientation for everybody on Mars, because everybody knows Mars. We make chocolate products, don't we? Well, we do, but just to give you the bit of the history, it's about a 100-year-old company. We are the biggest producer of chocolate in the world. We're also the biggest producer of gum products, but also the biggest producer of pet food and pet services. So we're actually the biggest employer of vets in the world, would you believe it? So we're not just Snickers and M&Ms, but we are Snickers and M&Ms. The company's been around about 100 years, family-owned, privately owned, not family-run, but the board are made up of family members. So the fourth generation are our sort of age and actively running the business. And of course, global business, about 35 billion for the finance crowd in the room. So yeah, how do you suddenly decide to invest $1 billion? Well, for me, the story goes back to 1947. So you don't suddenly decide. So in 1947, the guy who really started the business, Forrest Mars Sr., wrote a letter to all of the then employees of the company, associates. And in that letter, he wrote, the purpose of the company is to create a mutuality of benefits and services with all stakeholders. So he had this idea that his business could only be successful in the long term if everybody he touched was also being successful. And that was obviously the employees, it was the shareholders himself, but it was customers, it was suppliers, it was governments, it was competitors. So he listed all of these out, and he said, this is the sole purpose of the company. So that was a man ahead of his time. Now, it's taken us 70 years to work out what that meant, I guess, and what that meant was the Sustainable Intergeneration Plan, which we announced, where we said, we've got to grow the business consistent with the planet. So healthy planet, we've got to grow the business consistent with doing the right thing for everybody around us, or thriving people, and we've got to do the right thing in terms of health and well-being, nourishing well-being. So long process. I guess we've sort of put it all together in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So, tell us more about where does the $1 billion go? How does that break out?
Well, there's these three pillars in the plan. So there's a chunk against the environment. Probably it's about a third, a third, a third. So about a third against our environmental commitments, which are greenhouse gas reduction, so science-based reduction. So if you think about the business, about 25 million tons of greenhouse gas emitted, so about the same size as a small country. So we emit about the same amount of greenhouse gas as Panama. As across our entire value chain. So we've committed to reduce that by 2/3 in 30 years, which is the reduction required for the planet and every business needs to achieve, irrespective of how much we grow. So, we may have to, we've got to dramatically reduce our intensity. We've committed to zero water stress around the world, and we've committed to hold our land footprint flat, just on the environmental side. So we're investing in, and you can only do that, imagine trying to do that, you can only do that by transforming what you do. So a lot of it's about sourcing, raw materials, packaging, so buying different things from different places in different ways, and investing potentially in more expensive materials in order to solve for a lower greenhouse gas footprint. So there's a whole range of initiatives, but about a third on the environment, about a third on the socio-economic component, thriving people, and about a third on health and well-being. And there it's sort of product renovation, removing artificials, putting in place better for you ingredients without destroying the great products that we've got.
Yeah. So as you said, this doesn't happen overnight. This is a journey since at least 1927. But I know you've been significantly committed on a sustainability path for a decade or more. Could you talk a little bit about some of the learnings of the past decade? What's worked, what hasn't? What learnings you've applied now to this project?
So I think we really started about 10 years ago with a corporate level program, and typically what you do is you start with your own operations. So we've got about 150 factories around the world, and we started with an environmental program on those, which we called Sustainable in a Generation, because we recognized it was going to take a generation to achieve the targets. So we set greenhouse gas targets, water targets, and waste targets, and we sort of marched along that path. Now, frankly, we didn't have a clue how to achieve those targets when we started off. We knew it was something to do with efficiency and something to do with renewable energy. So we sort of learned as we went. The efficiency side marched on. What we started to discover was that there was a real financial benefit. So we started by putting, on renewable energy, we started by putting projects on our sites. Each site, you have a windmill here or a solar array there. And we realized that was not cost effective. And you couldn't get a decent ROI on that. But once you went to scale, and went to sort of national level projects, we suddenly started to see that we could do it and save money. So we've done a series of national renewable projects now around the world, US, UK, Mexico, and we're about to announce a couple of big projects in Australia, China, and potentially Russia. Every single one of those is actually saving us money now. So we've reached a tipping point on some of these new technologies now, where it's actually we're getting hard cost savings from going green.
Yeah. So I want to come to those, because I assume people will be very interested in some of the specific benefits. But before we get there, I'm interested. What is the how effective have you been in kind of measuring, your measured everything, whether it's externalities or your footprint, or Can you talk a little bit about the science that's led you to this?
Yeah. So again, we start with the factories, and we understood the footprint we had there. But really, in the last 3-4 years, we've understood the broader footprint. So when we're a food business, and food business is based on agriculture, and so when we look at our greenhouse gas footprint, 97% of it is outside of our factory walls. It's upstream in agriculture and with our suppliers, and pretty much all of our water footprint. So by really going back and mapping our supply chains, often through multiple layers, up to 7 layers back to farmers or mining extraction, we've understood where the footprint is, both environmentally and socially, and that you then start to do the Pareto and start to work on the big issues, and that's led us to move from a program that was really focused on our own operations to really working to transform agriculture in particular. And interestingly, one of the things that came out of that maybe 3-4 years ago was we realized we had about 1 million farmers that produced for us around the world. And that was a bit of a, I guess, a bit of a watershed moment. We started talking to the board about these farmers and where are they? It showed them, I remember having this board, map of the world, showing where all the farmers were. And they were rough estimates, but it was extremely helpful. And then we said, what sort of incomes have they got? And we said, we think about 80% of them live in poverty, and maybe of that, half of them live in extreme poverty. And suddenly the penny dropped for the family that if they were really going to live up to that mutuality principle, we need to get our arms around the extended supply chain. And our supply chain is no different from any others. Any other food business and pretty much any other consumer goods business, you go back there, what do you find? You find poor people, and those are the people that you built your business on. So that's the challenge. So we had our eyes open maybe 5 years ago to the scale of the challenge that we had on the socio-economic side, and that was one of the trigger moments I think that got the family and the board really engaged. So the next, okay, now what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And
so
hence the plan.
I'd love to talk more about that, because it is, we all, I guess, get there at a different time. There's some people who are way ahead on sort of being committed to these issues, and others who take some time. I assume you've been fighting the good fight for a while, and one by one you're bringing other stakeholders along, whether it's the board. And anything to say about, so it sounds like to one extent the tipping point was the kind of poverty issue. But on some of these other, particularly more classically sort of issues we define as sustainability, what have you? What is the persuasive argument that gets people in line?
Well, I think we're no different than any other organisation. Everybody has a board or a set of owners, and they're all different. So. We happen to have 10 members of the fourth generation of the family, and 3 or 4 of them would go, let's just do this. It's a great thing to do. It's our duty to do this. And there'll always be 3 or 4 who are like, show me the return. So if you want to get all of them, then you need to appeal to all of those. And I'm sure that's true of pretty much every organisation. So we knew we had a lot of support from a principle point of view, from a values point of view. That this is the right thing to do, and we believe that it will pay back in the long term. But we needed to bring along the others of show me the return. So we did a fair bit of analysis over the last 3 years to really try and put some hard numbers against the business case for this.
Yeah. And then how do you begin to operationalize this? So you make a commitment like this, everybody's on board, we're doing it. How do you then, have the metrics, have the strategy to make sure everyone's sort of going along for the ride?
I think it's at a whole range of levels. So at the board level, it's about shifting from purely measuring on the financials. So Mars was no different. That the primary metrics were earnings, cash, and growth, and had been for the previous 100 years. And that's what we remunerated senior managers on for those 100 years. So what we've done is alongside those, we've put the ESG measures. So we've got environmental targets. So at the same level, alongside cash earnings, we have a greenhouse gas reduction number. We have a number of people with meaningful improvement to their lives alongside the cash number. And those are being measured by the board, tracked by the board, and we're now starting to build them into remuneration. So you have to go all the way. Until somebody clever in this room comes up with a valuation formula that truly values the totality of these metrics and moves away from just a view of a multiple on earnings, you have to measure them separately. So we're operationalizing the measurement of these individually. We've cascaded those down to the business units. So the the general managers are responsible for delivering their component parts of a greenhouse gas reduction or a water reduction. So we're treating them as business metrics.
But some of them will have a positive effect on ROI, but some might not, but are still measurable metrics.
Well, the analysis we've done says that collectively they have a strong return on investment. I think I think this is highly pertinent. If you're looking for a return over the next 3 years, you won't find it. You'll find some of it, but if you're only interested in the return in 3 years' time, you would not invest in much of what we're doing. You have to be looking over. I think I always say the return is typically in the 5 to 15 year range, not in the first 5 years. Some of it is, classical efficiency projects in your factories. You're probably getting a return within 5 years, but some of the other returns are more in that 5 to 15 year range.
So you're a private company. Is it easier, do you think, to do a plan? You're talking about the payoff being out there a bit. Is it easier to do that as a private company than as a publicly listed company, do you think?
I think it is, yeah, because you're able to take that longer term view on the return. There are some disbenefits from being a private company, but one of the benefits is that you can take a longer term view, and for sure, until the markets value, who appreciate the value that's being created in that 5 to 15 year range, then it will be harder for publicly traded companies.
Yeah. So I'd love to drill down to the extent that it's possible to do so on some of these returns on investment.
Yeah.
And you talked about some of the quicker wins that you can get. But can you, I don't know, give some examples or something about how this plays out?
Chauncey's gone into a lot of numbers up here, but the buckets are the same. That you start with the pure cost savings, and some of those are obvious in the factories. You do an efficiency project, you save money, you save greenhouse gases typically on an energy reduction project. Renewable energy I talked about, so very concrete savings on every single renewable energy project we've done at scale. We have saved money versus fossil fuels. So the argument that this can't be done is baloney. It can be done. And then one of the poster child projects that we've been involved in a long time is cocoa. Cocoa's, you can't make chocolate without cocoa, so it's what we would describe as a critical ingredient. And we spend about $1 billion a year on cocoa. And frankly, if that industry doesn't become sustainable, the price will go significantly higher. And it's easy to see what the cost impact on us would be. So we have a number of critical raw materials where we believe if we do not have sustainable farmers and thriving businesses, then we'll have scarcity and we'll see a significant cost increase. And then there's a price on carbon. Now, you can take a view on what you think, whether there will be a price on an additional price. There's already a price on carbon, but whether you think there'll be additional pricing on carbon, we have a point of view that there will be. So we put a probability against that and a price on that, and put that against our carbon footprint, 25 million tons, and in 15 years' time we'll have 15 million tons of carbon, and our competitors will have 40 million tons of carbon, and we see a cost advantage and a price advantage and a competitive advantage from that. So you have to model it. You just have to, you're guessing, but you have to put assumptions against these things. But there's some very clear hard cost savings, and then there's some risk reduction. And Chauncey talked about you can come up with massive numbers, so you've got to scale them back in terms of probabilities. But obvious ones like license to operate issues, seafood from Thailand, huge human rights issues in that industry, going into every seafood that you eat. Pretty much every seafood that you eat in the US is connected to those supply chains. The government could stop bringing that in, could ban that at any point. So there's huge potential business disruption if you can't segregate and isolate yourself from those issues. So again, you can put a price on the risk of all of these issues, which we have done. And then the third big bucket is talent. So we in terms of attraction and retention and engagement of associates, that there's quite a number of studies that show the potential benefits. So a 3% increase in retention, or lowering your retention rate, is big money. Attracting the highest quality candidates whenever you're looking out. So candidates for NYU, sure we've got some here in the room who'd love to work for us. You become attractive. And you can put a number on all of these things. So there's a lot. As Tansi mentioned, there's lots of studies out there that are grounded in the individual elements of this, which you can add up. So we see good returns on talent, and then finally on the growth side. So from a consumer and a customer, we've actually been extremely conservative on that because the demand signal is still very weak. Consumers say they care about sustainability, but frankly, how many actually shop sustainably and are prepared to pay a premium for sustainability or a preference? It's a very small percentage still. And even from the retailers, our customers, our direct customers, the demand signal is very weak. So there's a number with strong sustainability programs amongst the big retailers, Carrefour, Walmart, but we might win awards from them, but we don't win more business.
Yeah.
That demand signal is still very weak. So we've assumed a very small. Now our belief is it's going to get stronger, and that companies and brands that have true sustainability credentials will be rewarded in time. But we haven't assumed much. But the bottom line is you add all of that up and you get a great ROI. So you don't have to dig that hard to get a great ROI. And that brings along the others who want to see a financial return.
Yeah, it almost seems contradictory that it's a talent retention tool to be cared about these issues, but then it sounds like even your own employees, when they go out and shop, they're looking at price and convenience and not. And I'm surprised that you haven't. I believe you, but I'm surprised that you haven't seen the needle move more on away from that in recent years. Yeah.
No.
So you're making this sound, and by the way, I'm going to open this up to questions to all of you in just a sec. You're making this all sound relatively easy, and I know you don't mean that, but what are some of the trickiest aspects of this? What are some of the biggest challenges? Some aspects are probably easier than others, but what are some of the tougher things to try to make work out now?
I think it's the time lag to the return. Mm-hmm. So even in a private business, okay, we've tripled our investment on this over the last few years to $1 billion a year, and $1 billion sounds like a big number, and in one sense it's a big number, but on the other side it's a very small number, and we'll invest tens of billions over the next 20, 30 years to become a sustainable business. But nonetheless, the question's still in the air. Are we investing more than our competitors? If we're investing $1 billion more than our competitors, that's a big deal within the P&L. Can we afford to do that in the short term? So I think one of the things here is really trying to get everybody moving together, and at an industry level, trying to get everybody moving together. It's much more reassuring to know, if we're investing $1 billion, then our main competitors are also investing $1 billion. And so I think industry coalitions have been really important. So we've worked hard at that, and that's not always easy to build real coalitions of action across industry and sectors. We've done that pretty successfully on cocoa, and have all, the 9 biggest chocolate and cocoa companies are all investing similar amounts now in sustainability, which they weren't 5 years ago, which not only levels the playing field financially, but it actually drives much more significant change. And because at the end of the day, a lot of your reputational issues are connected to the industry, not to just your supply chain. So I think that's a big deal. And then measuring, so we still have the challenge of measuring the returns. So, we can hypothesize about where the returns are, but some of these are still quite hard to measure and track. So that's still tough.
Yeah. Are there other companies that seem to be doing as much as you're doing, and if not, why not? Because it seems like, well, so a few years ago, Unilever was sort of way out there, and everybody knew what Unilever was doing, and all would say Unilever was leading the way. And you'd say, well, who's number two? And I don't know.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of companies like Mars that seem to be doing what you're doing? Or
I think everybody's raising their game.
Yeah.
I used Unilever as a stick to bash my board with for a while. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely had a sort of a catalytic,
Yeah.
and still doing some great stuff. I think it's a bit industry specific. I know the food and beverage industry very well. I think generally that industry is doing a pretty good job, and a number of the NGO campaigns have made a difference. Oxfam's Behind the Brands campaign, which really created a race to the top on a lot of these factors, and nobody wants to be at the bottom of a public list. And then specific activist campaigns on issues has got people moving. I think the bit that's missing is a sort of a fully science-based approach to some of these targets. Everybody has some targets. There's nobody who doesn't have a greenhouse gas target. The question is the quality of the target and the action. It's extremely challenging to set the right target. A company is just a sort of a microcosm of the world. The world hasn't been able to. We all know that it's a 2-degree warming. We can all translate that to a greenhouse gas budget for the world, and no country, frankly, has set that target yet. So we're all on the path to chaos. So at a company level, we've done that. We've set that target. There's very few who've done that. I'll say that. And then there's sort of some taboo topics. Everybody talks about human rights and livelihoods, but not many people talk about extreme poverty, and that's the reality. And so we've tried to lead on a few topics and to get some more people talking about the issues and then addressing the issues.
And is the conversation within Mars that the board and others may have to accept smaller profit margins until, let's say, 15 years, when there will be dramatically improved overall returns? Is that?
Well, that's what the ROI means, I guess. If your returns are in the there's
Yeah.
better finance people in the room for me, but if your returns are in the 5 to
Right.
15, then yes,
Yeah.
if we were if I was running a private equity business and was selling it in 3-4 years' time, and I was only measured on the financials, then I would not be investing in a bunch of things we're investing in, for sure. So we expect to see stronger returns than our competitors in that 5 to 15 and beyond.
Yeah. So I'd love to open up. I'm sure people here will have, yes, the hands are going up. And the only thing is I don't think there's a microphone to go around, so go ahead.
About 20 years ago, actually, it's like 40 years ago, I was very young. And the impression I had of Mars is it's a very secretive company, almost to the point of paranoia, very private, very strange. You can go in there at all. And more recently, it seems like, hey, you're opening up a little bit, you're investigating. My question to you, was I wrong about 40 years ago to see the firm was ultra secretive? And are you more engaged now in the public sphere? What's going on with Mars?
Okay, so I'm going to let me restate the question, because I know this is being taped. So this gentleman apparently was younger at some point, and but remembers that Mars was a sort of ultra secretive company, which I remember as well. And what happened? It seems like there's been a dramatic change. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't there 40 years ago, but I was there 33 years ago, and I didn't know anything about them when I joined. So I think you were right. They're a private family, and never sought the limelight. And so part of the reason was that they didn't want publicity, didn't need it, didn't feel the need for it, just wanted to build something. And part of it was a belief that, from a risk point of view, they were better off not having all of these brands associated with one company. So that if anything went wrong with a particular brand, you didn't know that Pedigree was made by the guys who made Snickers or whatever else. So they had their reasons for it, and at that time there weren't many benefits, frankly, if you're a private company. Now, I think over time they've understood that there's an expectation of transparency that wasn't there, both financial and supply chain transparency, and they started to open up. But we were late to the game in writing a sustainability, a CSR report. Nestle, Unilever probably wrote one 5 or 6 years before we did. But every time we've been more open, we've been rewarded for it. I think is whether in terms of reputation or in terms of license to operate. So we've learned over time, and we're continuing to push that boundary. The family is still convince me this is a good thing to do, to say more, but I guess we're becoming believers in more and more transparency.
Do you have a question? Yeah.
So this conversation here is about convincing the board, financial community, that sustainability pays off. About a week ago, exactly a week ago, in New York, there was the CEO forum where Paul Pullman took the stage and unapologetically said that the business has to be a force for good with deliberate actions. So it's slightly reversed. You touched twice on the poverty issue in the supply chain. So my question is, could you describe the type of the conversation at the board level? Is it about doing the right stuff and results will follow? Or is it the role of business to do the right stuff?
So let me, I guess, just recast this for the folks at home. I don't know who this is for. But the basic question is ultimately, well, contrasting at the thing last week with Paul Pullman, that he was saying the business has to be a force for good, kind of that the primary goal. You've been talking more about sort of ROI. So the question is, what is the conversation at the board level like? You talked about poverty, where it's these sort of two views.
Yeah, we're talking about ROI because that's the topic of today. Would we have done this anyway? Yes, absolutely. And 1947 told us that we should do it and that we should believe we should get a return on it. So we would have done this anyway. We've done the calculation to keep ourselves honest, and of course to make it easier to bring those within a group that are, hey, I'll go with it, but what's the tell me the return, how do we track it? The reason we're talking about it today is that not all companies will see it that way. So, I'm trying to make the case that whether you approach this from a values perspective or not, you should approach it from a financial perspective. When you've got both, it becomes very compelling. So, back to the poverty question. When I put in front of the board that there are 1 million people in our supply chain and many of them are living in poverty, they said, what are we going to do about it? They didn't say, what's it going to cost?
Question in the back. Pink, purple shirt.
Hi, Barry. Donovan Gordon with NYSERDA. We were actually on several conference calls last year regarding Renewable Thermal Collaborative. So I know Mars and you particularly are one of the driving forces behind it. Can you explain what it is and why it's important to Mars and what's the financial benefit to you in the long run?
Of the
Renewable Thermal Collaborative.
Okay, so this is a...
You can restate that one. I couldn't hear.
Yeah. This is an advertisement for the Renewable Thermal Collaborative. And it is important because when people think about renewable energy, they think about windmills and solar panels, and that gives you renewable electricity. But for a company like us, half of our energy is in electricity and half of it's thermal. So to drive heating and cooling, which comes from burning gas typically at our plant. So we have to solve that side of the equation as well. So the gentleman is talking about the industry coming together to come up with solutions on the thermal side, which don't currently exist. And so it's critically important. So did I cover that well enough for you?
Yes, you did. I'm talking to David Gardner on Thursday.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Bob.
So you told Jared you're becoming more transparent. I think that's great. Here's my question. You're a private company, so you don't have to report anything, right? But the TCFD came out with their recommendations on financially related climate disclosures. Does Mars have any plans to publish any kind of report following the TCFD's recommendations?
Okay, so the question is, again, noting that Mars is a private company, the question is whether Mars has any plans to publish some sort of public account of whatever, of the TCFD.
What is the concept of TCFD? Sorry.
It's the Task Force on Financially Related Climate Disclosures.
So climate disclosure. Does Mars, I guess, plan to make some of that public?
It's a big deal. Have you heard of it?
Sorry?
Have you heard of it?
Nope, I haven't. But is the question, are we publishing our performance on climate?
No, the question is, do you plan to try and publish according to the recommendations of the
I have no idea. Sorry. We will be publishing and have been publishing our greenhouse gas footprint. We will be continuing to publish the reduction in that. We're measuring that across our entire Scope 1, Scope 2, 3 emissions, and we'll be publishing the activities that drive us towards that. I don't know whether that's the same as the regulations that you've been talking about. Okay. I can't answer that now.
All the way in the back.
Thanks, Jonathan Howell, Designing Sustainability. I want to go in a slightly different direction with the consumer package you mentioned briefly. Help me untangle a couple of different pieces, right? So the initiatives you're undertaking make financial sense. You're tracking millennials, you're having retention rates that are higher, using water, energy efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. The ROI, you got a different hurdle rate, or it goes a little bit longer, board's going to take me some deferred profits. So why then still, in terms of bringing demand, damping demand, why is the price of the product and solution go up for the retail consumers buying the product? If all of these things are making sense financially, is the consumer providing sort of a bridge loan, essentially, until the ROI hits, or why is it more expensive?
So do you want to
Paraphrase the question.
Paraphrase the question,
Yeah. I have the mic, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question is, if there's a return and we're saving money, why does the price need to go up to the consumer? The answer is it doesn't. It should come down. So I don't see any connection between the two.
Can I follow up?
Yeah, we'll let you follow up.
All right, I appreciate that. So, okay, but I thought what you were saying was that the demand signal is still very weak, because people will say that they'll buy, but then they won't pay the premium. So is there a premium that's necessary for all of these things that are being done or not?
Well, some product categories will have a premium in, so often somebody will try and market something with a premium that's sustainable. But irrespective of the premium, consumers are generally, 97% of them are not shopping, making purchase decisions based on sustainability today, which is a shame. So we are trying through our brands to change that and find ways. We did something with M&M's, which is a huge consumer brand, billions and billions of consumers around the world. We did a PR exercise around fans of wind last year, where we tried to use the characters to get people interested in talking about renewable energy, for example. So we're trying to find the hooks between our brands and the consumer to engage them. But it's not to drive a premium. We would love to be rewarded if they bought more of our product than our competitors. And what I'm saying at the moment is that's not really happening.
We have to reward the man leaning around the pillar to be seen.
John Cusack, Computer Parkin Associates. one of the important parts that Thompson mentioned at the beginning is innovation is very important. I was just wondering, where do you get most of your innovation from? Is it from internal R&D and factors like that, or are you looking at some of the smaller companies like Madagascar, the little chocolate company in Madagascar that has done some innovative ways for trying to produce cocoa and reach the poor people as well? So where do you get your source of innovation to help lower the costs of your product as opposed to having it keep on going up because you're doing the same thing over and over again?
So this question was just, where does innovation come from? Is it internally through your own R&D, or are you learning from other, maybe smaller cocoa manufacturers and others?
Like innovation, it's in all types. It can come from anywhere, can't it? And it's often serendipitous. So the more you connect people, I'm a huge believer in. The more you connect people from different backgrounds. Like here we are today. Am I going to learn something today? Sure, I am. That I can apply to my business. So I don't think there's any magic formula about sustainability innovation. You've clearly got people in our business who are trying to think things through. But one of the things I think we have learned is collaboration. So within the industry, across the industry, this idea of uncommon collaborations. So we did something on I'll tell this short story. Aflatoxins, one of the biggest food security issues in the world. It impacts several billion people a year, hardly heard of. It causes liver cancer, and it's in many, many grains and cereals around the world. We reject a lot of product at our factories because of high levels of aflatoxins. So there's a business issue, but there's a much bigger humanitarian issue here. We're trying to solve that issue. So we've got a pile of scientists working on that. We ran a competition with a bunch of gamers to try and find some new gene sequencing solutions to this. So that's an uncommon collaboration. We're going to the gaming community to try and solve a world food security issue. So we're trying to do lots of stuff, and some of them work and some of them don't.
Okay, there are a lot more questions. I'm getting the hook from Patsy, so we have to stop now. But please join me in thanking Barry for an amazing work.
Thank you.